and welcome to the first edition of Half Hour, a podcast starring me, John Paul Logidici, as your host. In today's episode, I'll discuss history with my friend and fellow compatriot, Matthew Bastos. How are you doing today, man?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. This is the first edition, so it's going to be a little choppy, but I'm really hoping to kind of get this thing going and see what we're talking about. So, how's the whole work style going for you?
Everything's going good. Thanks for having me on, though.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so I'm waiting for you to lead the way, and we're gonna just kind of delve into the complex subjects that involve, history and all sorts of different topics. So, what do we talk about first today?
Yeah, when we were deciding what to even talk about for this podcast, the first thing we said was history. So generally, you and I, just to let the audience know, we both love history. And generally, history is pretty awesome, It's kind of funny because when I think of history, I think of the Karl Marx quote. Now, Marx and I disagree on virtually everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, if there's one thing I do agree with him on is that he made a famous quote saying, "History does not repeat, but it does rhyme."
It's such a fascinating topic, to kind of see because Karl Marx was such an influential figure in European and world politics in the 19th and 20th century. I mean, if you look at the kind of trajectory of the ideological battles in the world, we're still in conflict between capitalism and socialism, across the world. And I don't agree with him much either. I do think he was a smart guy, but that doesn't mean, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean I can call someone a smart guy, but that doesn't mean I agree with them. It's just...
He's got the theory, but the practice is a little wrong.
Yeah.
If you ask me personally.
Now, he was born in Germany, right?
He was a German kid. His dad was a lawyer. He was kind of a trust fund kid. He was pretty wealthy.
He was up already, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
He actually, he wrote it with, what was his name, Friedrich Engels?
Yes.
Now, what's interesting about his ideology is that it was adopted in Russia, which is the opposite of, where people would expect this to take root.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in Germany and France and England, that's where he thought this would take root, in the industrialized world.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe he didn't foresee the elite holding onto their power in this way. Maybe the people of these regions were just uninterested.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Germany kind of, if you really think about it, right? Germany fell into a socialist dystopia after this First World War, with the rise of Hitler and the Nazis and stuff like that. If you really think about it, their policies were very, very, very socialist. Other than the intense right-wing rhetoric. What people miss about that ideology is that it wasn't really on the political spectrum. It doesn't adhere to what we typically think of as right and left,
Mm-hmm.
or left and right. I'm getting my hands wrong now.
That political square is the worst thing ever, honestly. It doesn't make any sense.
Dude, when I actually did it, I got a few different results, but they were all dancing around the center.
Yeah.
At one point, I even got the center. I screenshotted it, but I think I don't know if it's on my Snapchat or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty cool. But yeah, they expected this ideology to take root in these industrialized countries, but it never ended up doing that. I think there were some times where it came very close, and in Germany's case, they just had this weird fusion of nationalism and socialism that produced this unholy, evil ideology. And you look at all the communist countries around the world.
I think it's not meant to.
Yeah.
I think it's meant to appeal to just the regular farmer. Think about it. If you're just a farmer on your farm,
Mm-hmm.
farming land, you don't think about the factories in the city. You're just worrying about your farm. So it's just you.
Yeah.
So the idea that when you grow let's say a fruit, that's your fruit. That's the idea anyway. It's the same idea with they lived under a czar for what, 300 years?
Yeah.
Roughly around that point. So it's the same idea. You had the American Revolution, which was, I would argue, secularism versus monarchianism. And so it's always a trend we're seeing. So we saw monarchianism versus secularism. Then we see communism versus capitalism. And I think right now what we're seeing a battle between essentially freedom and order. And I think you're seeing these conflicting interests. You can't view it as good versus evil. You're essentially seeing it as two ideologies, or at the very least, ideas clashing and seeing who can come on top, basically.
Safety versus freedom, if you will.
Right.
It's pretty fascinating. All I could think about when you were saying that was how, I walked into the library today and I saw the ballot drop box. Did you see that? It was star-spangled covered, and it just shows you the kind of changing dynamics in the world like that. So it is really fascinating. I wonder what kind of like the future of the political system in the U.S., for example, is going to look like. But looking at it historically, it's always been kind of like this two-party system, this kind of dyad where you have the Democrats and the Republicans, and they've existed politically for, oh God.
Since the Revolution, essentially.
Yeah.
But even still, it became the Whigs, the Federalists. It's evolved over time. I think what it is that the political system changes over time. And I don't view it as Republican versus Democrat. You have to view it as more than that. And so I think the two-party system is meant to sort of create that divide.
Yeah. And, I love how you touched on secularism and monarchism. And, I was watching another podcast with Jordan Peterson, and he had a guest on. She was from, like, Senegal and West Africa. And she was really telling an inspiring story about how, she moved to Europe and then moved to America and, like, started a business and was really trying to, like, get further and kind of move forward in her life. But there was always this discussion on, like, why does Senegal and other West African countries, why do they remain poor? Peterson touched on how the British common law tradition that touched East Africa, like a lot of the countries out there are doing very well. So Botswana is like a major economy in Africa. They do very well with this kind of system. And America was really born out of this common law system, where the British common law provided a better legal framework than the French civil law. Civil law is not very good for business, according to this podcast, and that's what I was listening to. But I've done my own research on the subject, and I've come to a similar conclusion as well. And it's so interesting that the United States, first of all, even exists. Like the very probability that a country with this type of system in place, it wasn't all good. I can't say that it was all good. I think this country has some flaws still to this day. But I genuinely think that the system we're using is a godsend, and without that kind of system in place, who knows where the world would be today.
You know what's funny? You actually said about civil laws, and France's civil laws doesn't apply to business. So what's funny is, the saying, laissez-faire economics?
So I've heard it, but I don't know exactly what it means.
So the story behind the saying is the French saying. And so what happened was that after the 7 Years' War, France falls into bankruptcy. They lost against Britain. They lose a major economic base in the colonies, right? So the king meets with major French businessmen to discuss what to do.
The King of France.
The King of France, who I believe was Louis XV, or maybe it was Louis XVI just becoming king.
And this was maybe in the 1780s or 90s, kind of, like after the American Revolution?
More like 1760s.
Oh, okay, so it's before.
Yes,
okay,
this is way before.
Okay,
and so the businessmen ask him, or he asked the businessman, what should I do about the economy? You guys know what to do. And they all just said, laissez-nous-faire. Leave us alone, basically. And it's just, leave us alone. Let us do business.
Let business do business.
Right, exactly.
I'm very free market, capitalist oriented. I've worked for a few small businesses. I've worked for a few big businesses. I always think that it's very good to have companies just doing their thing, even billion-dollar companies, despite all the hype about it. I think that there needs to be some more regulation. I think that the common prosperity of American citizens, but also citizens around the world, depends on corporations existing. But I also think that when they get too big, I think it becomes a problem because you have monopolies. Standard Oil with Teddy Roosevelt and Taft. Did you know Taft actually broke more trusts than Roosevelt?
He was, I believe, attorney before becoming the vice president.
Taft?
Yeah.
No way.
He was a big legal guy, big lawyer. That's why. That's how he knew so much about the laws. That's how he definitely got it done.
That's pretty fascinating. I always look up to, kind of the achievements of leaders in the past, not necessarily what they stood for sometimes. You know, I can't even agree with every policy on every president. You know, like that just seems ridiculous to kind of put people in a box and say
It's impossible.
yeah, like imagine the two of us sitting here saying, "Oh yeah, we support everything Thomas Jefferson did," you know, and I just can't see myself saying that because there are just genuinely things I disagree with that he did. Just as an example, though, you know,
It's just the ideology.
yeah, and it's just like I think you need to look at history as well on the achievements of some leaders rather than, you know, I think that history, you look at history and a lot of it was bad. You know, a lot of it was riddled with corruption and authoritarianism, even in this country, even back in the day, you know. But kind of moving from that point to like Teddy Roosevelt, I like how, you know, this president prioritized a lot of different aspects of American life. So I don't know if it was him. What was it, the Food and Drug Act of 1910? I could be getting this wrong, I'm not sure. I could be getting the date wrong, but there was an act that basically regulated what was going into our food. He helped establish the national park system and like put some national parks on the map. So I think that was huge. Like that, these are genuine achievements by a president that was elected, what, 110 years ago and some change maybe?
120 maybe.
Yeah.
He got in when
Oh yeah, you're right.
what's his name? Arthur.
No, McKinley.
Yeah, Arthur McKinley. That was his name.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, his last name was McKinley. I believe his
Yeah.
middle was Arthur.
Yeah, it could be William McKinley.
William
Arthur.
McKinley.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, he was assassinated. That's why. Then he came in
Yeah, he got gunned down.
at a train station.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It, you know, and it also makes you kind of put it into like reality how, you know, presidents were getting assassinated. I mean, that's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world if you think about it from a like statistical standpoint. Because what you had Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley,
Well, we're talking about the ones that actually got JFK.
JFK, those four, right?
We're forgetting about the attempted ones, though.
Yeah, Reagan got shot. I don't know who else got shot though. Like I think those are the only five I know.
Remember when what's his name, Andrew?
Oh, Andrew Jackson. Yeah, he had
Remember
like
the guy tried to shoot him, but he hit him with the cane.
yeah. So funny story with that. The man who was trying to shoot him apparently had two guns. He
Yeah.
had two muskets, and both of them misfired. Like both of them didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Andrew Jackson was like you know, he was one of those guys.
He was a
And
tough guy.
Hardcore.
He
Yeah,
was a tough guy.
Hardcore. His policies, Trail of Tears, tough stuff right there. You know, especially for the native people. But yeah, like he beat the ever loving senses out of this guy. Like he almost beat him to death with the cane. I mean, he was like, "Oh, you think you're gonna kill me? I'm gonna kill you
Can
first."
you blame the guy though? Someone tried to kill you.
That-
Wouldn't
yeah,
you
I
beat
mean-
them to death?
You know, like looking at it, I'm like,
It's no holds barred at that
almost,
point.
Yeah, you almost took him down. Like, did they have Secret Service back then?
Probably like the army.
I bet he was probably some special division of the army.
Well, remember the Secret Service actually was never made to protect the president. It was made after the Civil War to hunt down fraud U.S. dollars.
Really?
And it still is to this day, actually.
So I didn't know that.
There's like 10% of them actually protect the president. The other 90% go after fraudulent money.
See, that is something I just learned today. Like that is a brand new thing that I know.
Mm-hmm.
That is incredible. It just makes you think about how. Well, have you heard in the future they're thinking about, you know, ridding paper currency? Like they're not going to have paper currency
It's
anymore.
fun. People said the same thing about credit cards.
China is doing a cashless society. They're moving that way. I think they're already mostly cashless, either with cards or with like the phone pay.
You ever seen those videos in China where the robot dogs comes up to you, scans your phone basically? I think, yeah, and then they test if you have a COVID test or whatever.
For real?
Yeah, it's like what's the COVID passports? The dog comes up to you, and then it's asked to scan your phone for your COVID passport, and you put your phone on the dog, and the dog scans to see if you're okay. So actually dystopia, basically, is what we're trying to say
Yeah,
here.
and that's like, dude, that reminds me of a video I watched with, it was like on some news channel,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a classroom in China, and the teacher is standing at the lectern with like this screen, and there was a pie chart on the screen with blue and red sections.
Interesting.
every child was wearing a headband with a blue and a red light. And when the red light would turn on, it would actually mean that the student was not paying attention. And it allows the teacher to then know that, this student isn't paying attention, so that they can, say like, hey, Jimmy, pay attention. I don't know if that's standard procedure in every classroom, but it was happening in this one classroom. But I think that just goes to show you the relationship between technology and education, and how this is a country that is pretty, I like the word dystopian, because I'm not a fan of the Chinese Communist Party. I'll say it right now. I'll say it on YouTube. I'll say it on every platform.
Well, it's funny if you mention that too, because that idea of meshing humans and technology is something that is a real thing. You have Elon Musk with Neuralink. Personally, I don't agree with the idea of meshing my body with technology, because the idea is that we are flesh and blood, whether or not you're religious, whether or not you believe that we're here because of a cosmic coincidence or of a higher being.
Yeah. I think it's such an interesting topic, because I want you to imagine, 50 years from now, if, let's say, many different companies are producing these Neuralink chips.
Probably wouldn't need credit cards anymore. You just use your Neuralink to just transfer money to the store. Yeah.
Turn on the light.
Yeah, that's already in like movies and media. Yeah, right. You just use like turn off the camera or whatever, or the microphone, or you can just use it that way with the chip.
I always think about how children without this Neuralink chip, let's say in the far future you have classrooms with half the children with Neuralink and half of them without. The kids without the Neuralink are going to be disadvantaged, like in a way that is so cut and dry. In today's world.
Would you say it's public schooling that does this?
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I think with Neuralink, I think the simple solution is to, how old do you have to be to get a tattoo? Generally speaking, in the country, like 16.
18. Yeah.
Just make it that
16
way.
Maybe, I don't know.
16, 18, depending on where you are. Just have that with Neuralink. You can't get Neuralink until this certain age, even still, because they'd argue it's a private corporation. They can do that, but I mean, kids have phones when they're like 10.
Yeah.
I remember having an old flip phone when I was like 8. So
yeah.
I still remember the days of the flip phone.
Dude, my first phone I was in 4th grade. I think I was 10 years old. My mother and my father got it from my brother and I, and it was one of those slide-up keyboard phones.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had a girlfriend in 6th grade, and I would text her on the slide-up keyboard.
You had a BlackBerry?
No, it was called the Samsung C.
Interesting.
It was an awesome phone, man. I love that thing. There were 3 buttons, and there were like, it was like the haptic touch, so it was like the really bad touch screen. I'll never forget one of my buddies in the 6th grade, or maybe it was me, I don't know. Somebody spilled water like in my bag, and my phone was in there, and it got drenched and destroyed.
Yeah, those phones were not safe. I mean, even still, if you get water on your iPhone, you're just gonna get static on the speakers, which I had recently.
I called my father from the office that day, and I was like, Dad, I ruined my phone. It won't turn on. The screen is black and white like that. And he was like, wow, what'd you do? Like, blah, blah, blah. But going back to the other topic before, I could imagine a country like China with their kind of, the way their society, I study in Prague, for all those listening. There might be some more installments in Europe, so we'll have to see about that. But I met with a few people who either grew up in China or studied there for a period of time or were immersed in the culture. And I would always ask them, like, what is it like there? Like, how do people work? What are some of the values like? And a lot of the answers I got centered around this economic drive. So this group of people, propelled by, the government's narrative in the single party state, they're very, very economically minded. I mean, before the Chinese Communist Party, this was a beautiful country with a beautiful culture that was
6,000 years of history.
Yeah, millennia old.
Second oldest civilization, I believe.
Yeah.
Next to Mesopotamia.
Yeah. What is it? It's Mesopotamia, China, India, the Indus River civilization, which is modern day Pakistan.
Yep.
Egypt, even in Anatolia, right in the mountains there.
What about
they
Greece?
were like
Greece,
yeah. Mycenaean,
yep.
Minoan.
Yeah.
So they call one of those languages, it's called Linear B.
Interesting.
And it's like this ancient, language that was, that we actually don't have a translation for, apparently. I know the Rosetta Stone addresses one of the ancient Greek languages, but this Linear B is very, very mysterious. Like, we don't know much about it.
And this is from China?
No, this is, I think it's from Crete.
Interesting.
Or it's from Peloponnnesia, or like near Athens or something.
Interesting.
But to me, it's so fascinating how civilization just flows. Like Greece, if you look at the geography of Greece, right, it is a peninsula jutting out into the Mediterranean or the Aegean Sea, the Ionian Sea, more specifically. You have like Turkey to the east. You have all those little islands.
Italy.
Italy, I was going to say, Italy to the west is very similar to Greece. It's just bigger. It's literally just a larger peninsula.
Europe is kind of a peninsula if you view it from a certain view of the map.
If you were to, yeah, I like what you're bringing up here, because if you look at Europe, it's just a peninsula with many more peninsulas attached. You know, Iberia, the Italian peninsula, Greece, Denmark, Scandinavia, Britain.
It's just an
could have
island.
been, like, it could have been a peninsula, but it's obviously an island.
It's just an island.
Yeah.
Everyone takes some time and just twist it like this way. Or if you're looking, if Russia's here and Western Europe's here, just go like this.
Yeah. So like Russia's on top,
Yep.
and you look at it from down. Yeah, that I feel like that's always good to look at, and because it kind of redefines how you're viewing the world. Like, for example, the United States, we often just see, you know, the lower 48 and Alaska and Hawaii kind of like off to the left. But if you really think about it, you know, if you were to zoom out and kind of maybe flip North and South America upside down, you'd see how just geographically isolated they are from the rest of the world. Something I didn't know growing up was there were no horses in North America or South America until the colonization of the New World.
They brought it in, yeah.
There were no horses. So in a lot of the movies, you see Native Americans.
They think they're
or
like
Indians,
demons,
like riding on the horses.
Yeah.
But those were new to them. I mean,
Those are like 1800s though. Those movies were set in.
yeah, and I mean the first colonials got there 200 or 300 years before that. So I mean, for many of the natives of that time, it was kind of standard procedure.
Yeah.
But you know, for the tens of thousands of years that, you know, theoretically these people were separated from the old world, they didn't have a lot of the.
They thought they were demons. That's what they thought when the
Is
Europeans.
that true? Really?
Yeah, the Mayans apparently said that when they saw the Spanish coming in on their horses, they thought they were riding demons, basically.
I know that the Mayans, or no, the Aztecs thought the Spanish were gods. Like they
Yeah,
were,
I think it was the Aztecs. My mistake.
In their ironclad armor and like, you know, all of their technology, their iron weapons. I know the Aztecs only had bronze, but that isn't to say these civilizations were like, you know, completely in the Stone Age. You know, literally they weren't. They were a few millennia ahead of that. But I think that people fail to recognize just how the old world had more resources. They had animal husbandry, for example, like they were just able to get along with the animals better. And, you know, this is why, you know, with aliens, a whole nother subject, but, you know, they say that if aliens were to come here, it would result in a few different scenarios. But if they come here and they have the technology to get here, we might already be in deep trouble, you know, because it could be similar to how Columbus interacted with the natives. You know, there aren't any native people left in the Caribbean. They were enslaved and
Or killed.
A lot of them died. I'm sure that the genetics are still there because, you know, people reproduce and all that. You had a lot of slavery coming in, so that kind of went in there too. But it's just fascinating how if you look at the Earth like an organism like that, like there were people on this side and then there were people on this side, and then eventually they meet up because technology provides that kind of that ability.
That theory's been confirmed. The theory that the Native Americans originally went over that bridge connecting Siberia
the
to.
Bering Strait land bridge.
They went through it. They went down and they just mingled all over there.
Yeah, and there were no other humans there. What's interesting to me is that there are monkeys that are inhabiting, you know, Central and South America, right? And they've been there for a very long time. And you know, you have monkeys in the old world too. Like you have the Barbary macaques in Northwest Africa. You have the Western lowland gorilla in Central Africa. And you have monkeys in India and like Thailand and stuff. You have the orangutans in Indonesia. I could go on and on about this, but it just shows you how, you know, maybe these theories need more development. Like, who knows? Like, just how, evolution, especially with human beings, took place.
Well, you know what's unique though is that you know the golden ratio, right?
No, actually.
So the golden ratio was what the Greeks had used for their architecture. It was, I believe, 1:6:18, and that was what they used for their architecture when you see the old Greek pantheons.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Asia, they have the silver ratio, which is 1:4:18, I believe. And the belief is that if you look at it, the golden ratio is more of a rectangle, whereas the silver ratio is more of a square. But the idea is that they still develop the same way. Now, the reason why apparently there's a difference is that there's like a myth that Asians have some more rounder faces, and that's why the architecture is slightly different, but the sort of methodology is still the same.
I love architecture.
Yes.
Like, I don't know much, I don't know like the very deep understanding. Like, okay, I remember in school they taught us like Ionian, Corinthian, there was another one in Greece, that is. But I know that I love looking at like Gothic structures, and again, studying in Europe, they have such an interesting, flavor of architecture. Like in the U.S., everything's new. I talk with this ad nauseum with people out there. But yeah, I could look at architecture all day. I love viewing like how, you're right. Asia has a different style. Europe has a different style. The Middle East, interesting style there. I think every architectural feat has some beauty.
The methodology is different, or it's sort of the same.
And like Middle East has some ancient structures, but dude, you look at Dubai. Oh man, what a beautiful, beautiful city that is. What's interesting though is that the Burj Khalifa doesn't have a sewer system. They take everything out on septic trucks. So it's very interesting. They don't have like that kind of plumbing. So I think it's fascinating, but I think we should be wrapping it up here. I think we're reaching the half-hour mark. Do you have any other closing remarks?
No, but thank you for having me on, though.
No problem, dude. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you. And stay tuned for the second edition, and hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Goodbye.